Let's talk about the paragraph panel now. The paragraph panel are more global, and I'm going to zoom out. Let's just do a double click on my hand so you can see everything here, and I'm going to click on my text, and I'm just going to drag this text box down a little bit so we can see the difference. I do want to point out one thing that I'm seeing right now. I have a red box with a plus sign. That is telling me that I have overset text, meaning that my text is not all fitting at the moment. I have text that's in this container or this frame that I can't see. So this is the indicator that gives me that kind of alert. Okay, let's look at some paragraph panel options that we have. So I said earlier that this focuses on manipulating paragraphs or blocks of text. So our three main areas in paragraph are alignment, indents, and then some vertical spacing, the third part here. So our alignment's fairly simple. So I can do a left aligned. Let's have this text here. I can do a left aligned, I can do a center aligned, and have this middle paragraph selected. Let's just do a Control A to select all, and you're going to see what happens. Here's left aligned, here's centered aligned, here's right aligned. So you can see I have multiple paragraphs here, so it's applying it to all of those paragraphs. And then I do have a justification. These are many options for justifications, and then I have some options here to align towards a spine or away from a spine if you're doing some sort of binding in a publication. So here I can justify, which forces it to fit. This one is justified, but with my last line left aligned. Probably the best of all the options. If I do this last one where it justifies all, you get crazy hyphenations. Can you see I've got tons of hyphenations here? Let's just deselect. Lots of hyphenations, which are bad. I also get these really big areas of white. We call them rivers of white, which is bad. So it's not justification. You have to do cautiously because it's not always the best option. For our reading gravity, left alignment is much better. The next piece we have is our first line indent. So I'm going to take my second paragraph here, and I can see that my second paragraph starts with this line. The first line indent, okay, so we have some indents here. This is my left indent. That right below it is my first line indent. So if I do this left indent, what it just does is it moves this paragraph that I have my cursor in to the right, and the opposite side would move it to the left. Okay, so this one is going to be a little bit more difficult to see because my margin over here is such that my letters weren't really hugging that tightly. Okay, so again, 0 is where it is, there's no extra space. It's good to put space, a little bit of breathing room, especially if you have a color or a picture that it's associated or next to. The first line indent, of course, indents. This is the option that you are supposed to use. Instead of pressing the space bar 5 times, you need to be doing this first line indent so that all of your paragraphs will indent the same. Okay, so that's super important that you do that. The next one here, we have a space before or a space after. And so the space before allows us to add a space before this line. A space after, if I do it on this exact same paragraph here, it will add a space after the paragraph. So it's space before the top of the first line of the beginning of a paragraph, and the space after is at the end. Now you don't want to do both, because if I select this whole story here and do a space before and a space after, they will add together and I will end up with a double effect. Okay? So you have to be careful of that, and space before is used much more. Typically we don't have anything set with the space after, and you just do a space before and everything. The next piece here, we have a drop cap, and the drop cap allows us to choose the first letter to be drop capped, meaning that we have an increase in size to create a visual effect. And so we have our number of lines that this drop cap will fall to. So here's 2, Here's 3. You might think that this maybe is familiar with old-fashioned storybooks where they have once upon a time and the O is really large. That would be what is happening. It's called a drop cap. You need to use these sparingly. This would be how many of that first. So if I deselect, you can see how many of those letters are we doing a drop cap to. Okay, so typically, you're not going to do it to all, probably just the first one. You're not going to do it really crazy. And be careful because, again, one of those things to use sparingly because the more you use it, it's just a little bit overdone. A couple of things with hanging punctuation. So a lot of times we visually want to align things. And so we would do an optical margin alignment. Go under Window and go to Type and Tables and pull up Story. This again is another panel. But here I can choose to turn on the optical margin alignment, which would then apply to the entire story. So things like hanging punctuation controls the alignment of punctuation marks. So once we get into that InDesign a bit more, this is something that we really want to start focusing on. Okay, what's the difference between a hard return and a soft return? A hard return is where I press my Enter key. In the middle of this paragraph, I can press the Enter key and I've created a hard return. Notice how it remembered my drop cap. Those things are sticky. A soft return, I'll undo that. A soft return, which is a shift and an enter, bumps it down to the next line. Do you see that? It bumped it down. I'll do another one so you can see. But it technically did not make a new paragraph. So when I'm applying some paragraph settings, it's still part of my paragraph, but it is on the next line. So sometimes we need to do this to help with hyphenations. Widows and orphans are things that we have to be aware of. And as we get going again more in InDesign, you'll find these. I just want to define them right now. A widow, just remember both widows and orphans are bad. A widow is a word left alone at the bottom of the page, whereas an orphan is a word or a single line of text left alone at the bottom of the page. A widow left alone at the top of the page, orphan is left alone at the bottom. So there are some options that we will look at. And as well as the hyphenations, how I said there's the hyphenation checkbox there. We do have some settings here as well under hyphenations right here, where I can choose my settings for my specific amounts and to kind of control that a bit. Hidden characters are another thing that you may want to view at some point. Going under your Type menu, and it seems like this should be a View menu thing, but it's under Type, Show Hidden Characters. So what that will do is allow all of these little paragraphs, spaces. I don't know how well you can see this. Let's zoom in a bit. So every time a space bar was pressed, we have a dot. And wherever the return was pressed, we have our little paragraph symbol. Okay, so this is a great way to make sure you don't have multiple spaces or to make sure that your paragraphs, that you have everything grouped well. The last thing I want to mention in this area are glyphs. So a glyph, again, under your Type menu, and you may have seen that there's a panel as well, but under Type and glyphs, this actually allows you to enter in non-keyboard characters. So things specifically like your registration and copyright mark, I can put those up there. Some of these others with accents, the boxes or like dollars and cents. So things that we don't typically see, and this is a way that you can enter in some of these special characters, and they're called glyphs. All right, so hopefully the character panel, paragraph panel make a little bit more sense to you.